Hi, this is Gary with MacMost.com. Let's take a look at the new Macs that Apple announced at this year's Worldwide Developers Conference. MacMost is brought to you thanks to a great group of more than 1,000 supporters. Go to MacMost.com/Patreon. There you could read more about the Patreon campaign, join us, and get exclusive content and course discounts. So at the keynote event for this year's Worldwide Developers Conference, Apple had a lot of announcements. Among those were 3 new Macs. A new MacBook Air, an update to the Mac Studio, and a brand new Mac Pro. So let's start by taking a look at the new MacBook Air. The changes, this is a 15-inch screen. So the previous MacBook Air was a 13-inch screen. Technically 13.6 inches and the new one's 15.3. But the larger screen is something a lot of people really wanted. These 2 MacBook Airs now exist side by side for purchase and they have the exact same M2 processor in them. You can see here the same number of cores, same GPU and everything. Memory and storage options are also the same. But what's different, of course, is the screen. So you can see the larger 15.3-inch screen has 2880 pixels across versus 2560 and 1864 vertically versus 1664. So larger screen, more pixels. The thickness of it is basically identical, but the width and depth, of course, change to accommodate the larger screen, and there's also a little more weight to it since it's larger. Now the larger chassis gives more room for some speakers. So the 15-inch model has a 6-speaker array instead of a 4-speaker array and force-canceling woofers. Another change is the battery. With the 15-inch model there's more space for more battery, which is good because the screen's going to use more power. So I end up with about the same amount of battery life for a day, but you have a larger battery and it comes with a slightly larger charger to accommodate it. If you want the 15-inch model, it's going to cost you $200 more than the 13-inch model. Of course, you're probably not going to want to get the $1299 model. The $1299 model comes with too small of a drive, 256 gigs. So the larger drive one for $200 more makes sense. And if you want to double the memory, that's going to cost you $200. And doubling the storage to 1 terabyte is going to cost you another $200. So you can have a 16 gig, 1 terabyte machine for just under $2,000. So now Apple actually has 3 MacBook Air models. The 13-inch M1 model, that's the older design, and then the 13-inch M2 and 15-inch M2 with the newer design and colors that are available. And you can order these now and they deliver starting June 13th. Now Apple's updated the Mac Studio with the new M2 chips. So before you had the choice between the M1 Max and M1 Ultra chip in the Mac Studio, and now you have the M2 Max or M2 Ultra. So if you're looking at the Max chips, basically you've got 12 cores now instead of 10, 38 GPU cores instead of 32, and this will give you basically 25% better performance. That's if you've got the Max chip. Now if you go with the Ultra chip instead, then it's 24 versus 20 cores for CPU and 76 versus 64 GPU cores. And Apple says this will give you about 20% better performance. So for someone like me that has a Mac Studio with the M1 Ultra, I'm certainly not going to go and spend the money to get this new version. But if I did have the Mac Studio and I was waiting, then this is probably the time to jump on one. Now the new processors also mean that you can go higher in memory. So when you buy one, because remember you can't upgrade the memory later, you can now go all the way to 192 gigs of memory. The extra GPUs mean you can also have more screen. So before you can only have 4 Pro XDR displays. Now you can have 6 of them. Or if you want, you can do 3 8K displays. The new machine also upgrades the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth slightly to newer versions. And the price is the same. In fact, there is no more M1 Mac Studio. The M2 is now just the current model at the same price as before. So anybody buying now as opposed to last month is just going to get a slightly better machine. And then of course Apple also introduced the new Mac Pro. So this is a major change because the previous Mac Pro was an Intel-based machine. Apple's last Intel-based machine. Apple now only has Apple Silicon Macs. No more Intel Macs unless you want to buy a refurbished one. You can now get the Mac Pro, which looks similar to the previous version, but it has the M1 Ultra chip in it. So let's compare it to the Mac Studio, which has the same M2 Ultra chip in it. So these 2 machines have the same chip. So what are the differences? Well, obviously the tower is a much bigger and heavier machine. What you get is expandability. For instance, you can actually swap out the solid state drive for a new one. Apple already sells the 1, 2, 4, and 8 terabyte SSDs. So the difference really is in expandability. So we've got 8 Thunderbolt 4 ports in the Mac Pro versus the Mac Studio. We've got 2 HDMI ports on the Mac Pro and they're both 8K ports. And we've got dual Ethernet. But the big one is the fact that we have 7 PCI Express expansion slots. So you could actually use these to insert PCI Express cards, audio cards, video cards, whatever is compatible with this new Mac Pro. That's the real big difference, being able to expand with these PCI Express cards. And for that you're going to pay big time. It's $7,000 for the base model. And nobody getting a Mac Pro is going to get the base model. You're at least going to expand the memory quite a bit and probably get a larger drive. There's also a rack mount model for $500 more. Now this Mac Pro is probably not for you. It's definitely not for me. It's basically a Mac Studio with more expansion and you pay a lot more for that. It's really for production houses or companies that can basically afford any machine. If they're saving their employees just a little bit of time having those expansion slots and whatever cards that they're using, then they're going to spend the money to do that. A production house making a feature film may get these without even thinking about it. They may actually fill a room with them. Spending $4,000 more for a Mac Pro is not going to be a big deal when you're looking at multi-million-dollar budgets. Apple's actually done a great job providing for pros like me by having the Mac Studio. For a pretty reasonable price I can get something that has the same power as a Mac Pro but without the expandability, which I don't really need. Anything I'm going to add to it I'm just going to use one of the Thunderbolt 4 ports for. I don't need to have the PCI Express cards. And anybody that really needs those cards probably has the budgets that can support getting a machine that's this expensive. So if you're looking at the Mac Pro and thinking, wow, that's expensive, why does it make sense to get that instead of a Mac Studio? Well then it doesn't for you. Just like for me, the Mac Studio is the machine for us. So this is the latest Mac hardware from Apple. We probably won't see any other new Macs until this fall at the earliest. Of course, Apple also announced the new Mac OS called Sonoma. That will be available this fall. I'll be doing videos on the new features in Sonoma over the next days and weeks. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click the thumbs up button below to let me know. I publish new tutorials each weekday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out.